Hello, everyone. My name is Bruno Herrmann from LT-Innovate, and today I'm truly delighted to talk to Coral Diez Carbajo. How are you, Coral?
I'm fine, thank you, Bruno. How are you?
I'm all right. Thanks a lot for your time today. Coral, you are a leader in digital transformation. You are a member of Women in AI Austria, and you're also a member of another think tank, which is the AI localization think tank. So that's great because we're going to talk a lot about AI today. But just to start, if you could say a bit about yourself, a few words about your background, what are your focus points, etc., before we dive deeper into the topics for today.
I started out in translation with a degree and a master's, but pretty early on I realized that the part I found most interesting wasn't the translating itself. It was watching how people actually use the tools. So that pulled me into research. I started my career as a university professor, actually, while working on a PhD in human-computer interaction to bring innovative AI features that at the time it was just the very early days of neural machine translation into translation platforms without overwhelming the people that are using those tools, right? So during that period, I learned how to explain difficult technology to different audiences and how to design AI features that humans aren't afraid to use. That experience opened doors to my next job in a language service provider where I worked for 7 years in many different positions. But let's say my unique value really shined in three roles in particular. I worked as a machine translation strategist for 3 years, then as AI solution strategist, where I was welcoming new use cases related with generative AI and large language models and opening new revenue streams for that LSP. And I worked as digital transformation strategist, which was really about enabling the company to use AI well from the inside out. And as you mentioned, in parallel, for the past couple of years, I've been a member of the AI localization think tank. It's a community founded also to give our industry a more rounded, honest view of where AI is taking us by putting together people from all the different corners of the industry, buyers, sellers, technology providers, academics. And I'm also part of Women in AI Austria and AI Austria, which are two very active communities here I live in Vienna. And they are very important because they are giving me a broader overview of what AI is and where AI can actually be used and how AI is seen outside of the language industry.
Your profile, your background is very useful today in the times we are going through, because obviously, as you said, you have already touched on various facets of language management, not just translation, but other types of activities, other types of requirements when it comes to language. So I think that's great. And obviously, we often start these conversations with the topic of transformation. Transformation is, of course, driven by AI today. But okay, transformation is also part of a general evolution in the digital space. So you mentioned that, of course, you've been in the space of data and content for a number of years. So with this experience and your expertise, what does language intelligence, which is at the core of transformation, so what does language intelligence mean to you today? And how would you define, how would you explain why and how language intelligence is different from what we used to call localization?
It's a very, very good question. I think that for a very long time, localization meant taking content that already existed and adapting it to another market. It was a downstream function. Language came at the end after the the product, the campaign, the decision was already made. And then at the end, you had to make that same thing multilingual. What changed completely is that I think language now has moved upstream. So when I prompt a model, and now prompting is not the same as what prompting was 3 years ago, even if it's only 3 years, but you can do everything by prompting. When you prompt a model to generate a video, to design a user interface, to draft a contract, to build a prototype, you are using language as the tool to make the thing exist in the first place. So language is the interface to almost every AI-powered system that we work with. So language intelligence is a discipline of understanding how language shapes outcomes across the entire life cycle, because you have to use language to create the product, then you have to use language to modify that product, then you have to use language to translate that product. So it's how you prompt, how you instruct, how you evaluate, how you make sure that the outputs are accurate and culturally appropriate and safe. Localization is still part of that picture, but now with language intelligence, it has opened a bigger place for the translation industry to move into.
You mentioned something which is very important, which is that localization is one part of language management or language intelligence. And I think that's really why language intelligence is, I would say, it's probably not the promised land for language people or language professionals, but it's going to be probably a very open space for people who want to make the most of the transformation that is going on today. So, again, with your expertise and your experience, what is the implication for language professionals who have spent many years or their whole careers working with translation localization? What would you say to them about moving from where they are today to language intelligence, for the reasons you mentioned, because language intelligence is broader, more comprehensive than, of course, just translation localization?
I think we have been preparing for this moment without knowing about it. I think that everybody that's been seriously working with language has been practicing the skills that now we need as humans working with AI. So because we think about ambiguity, about the register, about how the sentences change depending on who says it, to whom, the cultural context. I think that is a big part of what prompt engineering is now. And maybe I can give you a practical example of something that happened to me last week. I was in a responsible AI event here in Vienna. And it was very cool because it was my first experience with a humanoid robot, and you were prompting the robot by giving it instructions verbally, and the person that was doing that, she was well, we could play with the robot, and this person was saying, walk to the front, and every time with the walk towards the front of the room, the robot was giving one step. So if the room was 20 meters long, the person had to say walk 20 times. But then when I saw that, I just said, move towards the front of the room to the robot. And with one instruction, the robot actually moved. You didn't have to repeat the same thing 20 times. So that's just a very simple example of how the fact that we know how to use language and we see what happens, we immediately evaluate, okay, if I say walk, it's just giving one step. So which other words can I use so that actually the thing that I want to happen happens? It was a very stupid little example of a real life application of how knowing the language makes you faster reaching the objective that you wanted to reach. But I think the risk that we see in our industry is actually that we are framing it defensively, as the machines are here to take our jobs. But I will flip it. The machines still do need us. we maybe not in the roles we had before, but we need people who can define what is a good output, who can design the guardrails, who can evaluate what's happening after every prompt, and who can adapt the way you prompt or give the instruction. And so probably the jobs are going to be different, but I think that we are ready for it. We know how to communicate things in different ways.
First of all, I love your example between 20 instructions and just one, because I think indeed that's it's the value of language intelligence as a whole, is actually to facilitate and to accelerate how people work together, and of course now how people work with machines. I think you today with AI, you just don't give instructions to AI. You let AI do something for you. So it's a shift for all humans that we are. And I think that your example with the robots is exactly the power of language, is that if you use language effectively, you can save a lot of time, you can be much more effective. One word can make a difference in a prompt. One word can make a difference in a model. And if that model is actually going to be underlying agents, the agent might be behaving properly or not. So every word of the language matters in some way.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, of course, that you are in what I would call the intersection between the language industry and the broader AI community in Austria. So Women in AI Austria. So since you are, you have one hand in each community, what sort of perspective do you see from these two communities about technology? Is it the same perspective, or is it some sort of complementary perspective, or even conflicting?
I wouldn't say conflicting, but definitely complementary. It's very interesting because during the day I'm here, I'm working my language industry job, and then during the evening I go to AI Austria. So every day I have kind of to wear both brains. The language industry tends to be more focused on the details. It looks at quality, at fidelity, and at risk, and we are also very obsessed with the edge cases when the mistranslation can hurt a brand or mislead a patient. So I think that going deep into the details is the strength of the language industry. It can also make us a bit inward looking. We measure AI against the gold standard of a human translator, and sometimes we also miss on the bigger shift of what's happening around us. On the other side, the AI community at Women in AI Austria and also AI Austria, which are two separate groups, the approach is completely different. They are thinking about the infrastructure, the regulations, agents, new product categories, new entire business models, how to restructure companies, to have maybe roles as a chief AI responsible person, or what further changes need to happen for a company to actively implement AI. And language comes up, it's true. Often it is as an afterthought, but they are very much aware that for every one of the use cases that they want to use AI, they need language at some point. Especially AI is not an afterthought when they realize that when they prompt in English, they can do this, and if they prompt in German, they can do way less with the AI budget that they have in the company. So that's where they are very much aware of the implications of language. So I have learned that everybody has their strong points and also the blind spots. So that's why I'm very much convinced that putting language together with all these other people in one same space would actually be beneficial for everybody, because the ones that are thinking about the infrastructure and regulation could benefit from the language skills that language people have. And language people could grow and expand their horizons and actually go into other, potentially, if they like to, into other roles by accompanying these other companies that are thinking about agents or new products or new entirely business models.
Just to connect with your answer, with your latest answer, obviously organizations are, facing challenges and they are trying to change or to turn these challenges into opportunities. But still, organizations are facing a number of small or big challenges. And specifically when it comes to adopting or improving language operations, actually to make sure that language intelligence is effective in their organization. So in your experience, where do these organizations facing challenges often get stuck? Where are the pitfalls for them?
I think there are a lot of challenges, a lot of reasons or points where an organization can get stuck. I don't think it's the technology itself. It can be the budget to access the technology. That's a different problem. But I don't think the technology itself is the problem. I think that's actually the easy part. But organizations can get stuck on everything around it. From a success metrics point of view, teams can buy a tool, deploy it, and then they cannot answer the question to know if it's working or not, because nobody defined what good looks like before rolling it out. So are you looking at it from a linguistic quality, from an operational efficiency, from a cost point of view, user trust, adoption? All those metrics need to be defined before implementing the technology. And adoption is also one of them, of the places where organizations get stuck. I think that an organization can invest and deploy, let's say, the best model in the world at that moment. But if the people who are supposed to use it don't trust it, don't understand it, feel threatened by it, they are not going to use it. So nothing's going to change. It's not going to be adopted. So I think it's key to invest in literacy, in creating a champions network within the organization, and having those people coming back to a central person with their problems, so that that central person can design solutions that then will solve a real problem and it will drive the adoption. And another issue is governance. So who owns the decisions? Who is accountable when something goes wrong? What data can be sent where? How is the organizational design of the company changing? Who is tracking which AI tools are allowed or not allowed within the company? And having buy-in from the C-suite to adopt the AI features. So I guess, metrics, adoption, and governance.
That matches my own experience as well. And you mentioned something very interesting about a central person to actually, drive or to own AI literacy or AI fluency. It's even better than literacy. So if you had to give, again, a recommendation to an organization or about this central person, where would you say that this central person should sit? Should it be somebody from the IT team? Should it be somebody from the product management team?
I think it really depends on the company itself, how the hierarchy of that organization is working. It could be in many different places. It could even fit next to or under HR, because at the end of the day, you need to make humans use other tools. You need to teach those humans. So you could see it very nicely next to a learning and development program, for example, if you look at it from the human side of it. So I think regardless of where it sits, it needs to be a collaborative effort from many head of departments. If you want to have a human-centric point of view, HR needs to be there, or whoever is managing learning and development. If you want to, if it's more technology-driven, IT or learning or development team, if there's a development team, research and development. There should also be somebody from finance in that group, because at the end of the day, AI needs budget, especially to experiment with it and to know how far that organization can go, how many tokens can I use as an organization. So it is, I think it would depend on maybe the current people that work in that company. I think the C-suite should sit down and think who's in the best interest to be the main champion representing that AI transformation. But it can be seen from a financial point of view, from a technology point of view, from a human point of view.
Right, and you mentioned collaborative, and I think that's really key, because AI has various facets. You mentioned finance, you mentioned legal, you mentioned IT technical. So I think that collaboration, for instance, between data scientists and language experts, all these various expertise can really help, build a central ownership of AI, so that all different sides of AI are taken into account. Otherwise, it might be too technical, or it might be too operational, it might be too legal. So you're right. I think there is probably no single person who can do all that. I haven't met that person yet. But of course, when you have the collaboration between, indeed, the leader of IT, the leader of data science, the leader of marketing, etc., then you can make sure that this ownership of AI adoption covers, all functions, all roles, not just one. So we talked about transformation, and the other topic for these conversations is, of course, value creation. And of course, if we look at value creation, we have to look at the future. And for instance, last year in the yearly conference, the Language Intelligence Conference, where you spoke in Vienna last year, I met a number of people from different industries, different companies, telling the same thing. We need to find value. We need to chase value where it shows up. And that's, of course, very challenging. It may sound easy, or of course you need to find value, because otherwise what is your job if there is no value? But so since, we heard that a lot last year in Vienna, and I hear that nearly every day, talking about value creation for language professionals, why do you think that organizations need to move from localization only, or localization in a silo, to end-to-end language management? And how do you see that how do you see this move in practice?
I think as long as we are united or represented as we are the localization team, we would need to be placed in somewhere within the organization, and that's good, because that gives you a place to be, but that's also bad, because it creates a very siloed perspective of what you can do and where you can bring added value. Localization has always been seen as the back office step, right? And with language, understanding it as language intelligence, as I mentioned before, you are prompting in every different step. So the things that we are doing now with translation, with localization at the end, checking that the output is giving you the right quality, seeing if it reaches some kind of a benchmark or ISO certification, whatever it is that you need to measure, that needs to happen now at the end of every prompting step. So let's imagine that you are prompting to design an interface, and then you prompt to modify the interface, and then you prompt to, we are using language in all these steps, but designing the interface is not within the localization department. That is within the product department, or user experience, user research department. So I think we need to expand. It's good that we've been located in our localization group and our localization little room for these years, but I think now we can expand and just go where we are needed and move around the other rooms, the other departments. So if you think about how a piece of content travels nowadays, someone has an idea, then they prompt a model, then they shape it, then the model gives you different options, even if you don't ask for different options. Then there's people reviewing it. That is actually the same thing we've been doing with translation, but can happen with video creation, can happen with designing a tool, even prompting some AI tools to generate web pages from nothing. So all the steps that we've been doing in our little localization room, we can now expand them to the other ones. But maybe we don't need to have a room per se. We need to just go into the other rooms.
Exactly. Well, I think you mentioned it. It's really going outside the localization bubble or the silo, whatever. It's actually to expand language expertise to other tasks and other activities in content supply chains, like creation. You mentioned creation, like design, development, testing, etc., all the way through delivery. And there are a number of activities, a number of tasks that require language expertise, not just localization as a back office task, as you rightly said. But I think that's the opportunity for many language professionals is to undress as localization people and to dress up as language expertise people. So that's it's a change, but and I think since it's a big change for a number of people to make that move. You mentioned that communities like the AI localization think tank is great to give everyone a voice, actually, to make sure that people can exchange, they can interact, so that there is not just one opinion but different ways and different sides of the conversation. So why do you think those peer-to-peer communities are more important now than ever, obviously?
Right now, it's because the pace of change is faster than any single person or any single organization can absorb on its own. If you rely only on your knowledge or only on what your company knows, you are already behind. Nobody can read all the news of what's happening out there right now in the AI field. And that's also one of the reasons why we created the AI localization think tank. We kept seeing the same things, the smart, experienced people across the industry, quietly in small rooms, having the same conversations in parallel, making the same mistakes, hitting the same walls, not knowing what others were doing. Maybe others already experienced that problem and found a solution. So a peer community, a peer-to-peer community helps you move faster at the rhythm that actually the AI era requires you to move. Because if you already tried and you already failed, and I know that you already failed, then I don't need to try that. I can try a different thing. Two people trying different things and failing, we will fail, will help us explore more, cover more ground faster, right? So it was very important for us to bring a voice to express our experiences so that we could also be updated faster. The other reason, or one of the main reason for us to create the AI localization think tank was to give people a voice. We realized that a lot of the loudest narratives around AI in our industry come from tool vendors and consultancies, maybe people who have something to sell, that have some interest in selling or presenting AI in a certain way. But communities give also the practitioners, the people that are actually doing the work, a place to share their own experience, what worked, but also what didn't work, and also especially the things that maybe the glossy case studies usually leave out. That's also why I really like the language intelligence conference in Vienna, because it's very much focused on use cases, and it values the openness. When people say, I tried this and it worked, and when people say, I tried this and it didn't work, that covers some ground for other people to build on top of it. So I see communities and the open spaces where you can talk about what worked and what didn't as the space where education actually happens nowadays, not formal training, the kind of literacy that you get from talking with people who tried things and achieved something or not. This is what, in my view, matters more than ever, because there are no textbooks yet. By the time you create the textbook, the technology has moved ahead and you're already outdated. We need to learn from more of informal communications between peers.
You are reading my mind, because I was going to say that all these people sharing voices and sharing experiences should really join us in November for the language intelligence conference, because that's the best place where people can really, in physical format, so in person, I would say, they can really, listen to what other people are doing, and also sharing what they do themselves. And just to, as a conclusion, I have one question for you, which is something that I have to do myself from time to time, which is that let's assume that in this conversation we are joined now by someone who is not in the language industry, or he's not even exposed to the language industry. So somebody who is discovering the language industry. What would you say in one or two sentences to that person about the move, the transformation that is happening now in the language industry to be more focused on language intelligence and not just on translation localization? How would you say that to someone who is, who is totally candid?
Yeah, that's funny. It's actually very difficult. At the beginning, it took me some effort to explain outside of the language industry what is it that I was doing when I was going to these other communities. I would say that a lot of people still think of translation as you have a book and then you have a book in a different language. And I would tell them that thanks to generative AI and large language models, the language is not an afterthought anymore. It's something that needs to be embedded in all the products that all these other people, or web pages that all these other people are creating. So we are just not the people that are there to take which is very, very important, take their product to other markets, but we are actually the people that are going to make their product work.
Absolutely. No, then that's exactly what language intelligence is all about. It's actually to make us work together as humans. Whether we are creating something, or we are selling something, or we are training other people, everything we do is based on language.
Yeah.
And I keep saying, even look at one day in your life, language is everywhere. When you wake up in the morning, you may read a magazine, it's language. You may look at a website, it's language. You go to your car, GPS, it's language. So language is everywhere. There is no place where language is not, except in the desert, because there is no human there. But okay, that's a different story. But yeah, absolutely. So that's great conversation, Coral. I really enjoyed your advice and your perspective. And I think unfortunately we have to leave it here for today. We'll have more conversations in the future, and of course, you are also very loyal participant and speaker to the Language Intelligence Conference in November. So again, this year will take place in November. So watch out for the website for more details. And thanks again for your time today. And thanks to the audience for listening to us. And see you next time for another conversation.